My daughter said, "It's safer this way." So I locked the door and took the key. The words still echo in my mind like a funeral bell, marking the death of everything I thought I knew about love and family. Today, I'm going to tell you something I never thought I'd share. And if you, for even a second, feel like this sounds familiar, just please leave a like and subscribe. It'll help me continue opening my heart like this. I wasn't always alone. There was a time when my brownstone in Brooklyn smelled like cinnamon on Sunday mornings, and echoed with the kind of laughter that only comes after family dinners when everyone's belly is full and hearts are warm. I remember small hands tugging at my sleeves in that very kitchen, begging for stories, pleading for just one more cookie from the batch cooling on the marble countertop my late husband Frank had installed for our 20th anniversary. Back then, I thought love was armor strong enough to protect a mother from being forgotten, but I was devastatingly wrong. The last message I received from my daughter Emily arrived at 4:47 p.m. on a Tuesday that should have been perfect. I was standing in my kitchen, wearing the navy blue dress she'd complimented last Easter, holding a warm apple pie that had taken me 3 hours to perfect. The dining room table was set with our wedding china, the delicate spode pattern with tiny blue flowers that Emily used to trace with her finger as a child, linen napkins folded into perfect triangles, crystal glasses polished until they caught the afternoon light streaming through windows I'd cleaned that morning, hoping everything would be flawless for her visit. The message read, "Mom, it's safer this way. We'll reschedule dinner soon. Promise." Just like that. 28 years of motherhood reduced to a text message shorter than a grocery list. I had spent the afternoon marinating the pot roast, the same recipe Emily used to beg for every year on her birthday, the one that required overnight preparation and patience I gladly gave because it made her smile. The carrots were cut into perfect rounds, the way she liked them as a child when she'd sit on the kitchen stool and help me cook. More hindrance than assistance, but bringing joy that made every extra hour worthwhile. "Safer this way," she said, as if my love had become dangerous. So I blew out the hope I had carried all week, the anticipation that had made me hum while cleaning and smile while shopping. I sat at that table alone, chewing each bite of dinner as if it were a meditation on where I now stood, outside the lives of the very people I had raised, nurtured, and sacrificed everything for. The pot roast tasted like sawdust. The pie remained untouched, its golden crust mocking me from the counter. That night, sleep eluded me completely. I lay in the bed Frank and I had shared for 32 years, staring at ceiling cracks that had become as familiar as old friends, listening to the sounds of Brooklyn at night, distant sirens, neighbors coming home from late shifts, the occasional laugh from young couples walking past my window, living the kind of spontaneous life I remembered having once. Something gnawed at me deeper than disappointment. Not just the canceled dinner, but the way Emily's message felt rehearsed, hollow, like words selected by committee rather than written by my daughter's heart. I kept hearing her voice saying "promise," like it was a placeholder instead of a commitment. The way politicians use words that sound meaningful but carry no weight. And then, at 2:33 a.m., my phone buzzed. A charge alert from my bank, $328.94. The Graywood Inn, Manhattan. My breath stopped. The Graywood Inn wasn't just any restaurant. It was our place, sacred ground, where Frank and I had celebrated our last anniversary before the cancer took him, where I'd held my grandson Jacob's tiny hand as he tried his first crab cake, his face lighting up with wonder, where Emily had cried telling me about her first heartbreak at 16, and where we'd toasted her college acceptance letter with sparkling cider because she was too young for champagne. But this receipt showed 4 entrees, 2 bottles of wine, a birthday dessert with sparkler candles, and a generous tip signed E. Thomas, my daughter's married name, all paid with my credit card, the one she had borrowed 6 months ago for what she called an emergency gas situation. I stared at that glowing screen until my eyes burned, hope and denial wrestling in my chest like 2 drowning swimmers. Maybe it was takeout for a sick friend. Maybe a work dinner she'd reimburse me for. Maybe anything except what my mother's intuition already knew with crushing certainty. But the timestamp revealed the truth. 7:04 p.m., the exact time I was sitting in my kitchen, eating silence and wondering why my daughter found my company too dangerous to endure. The next morning, I did something I'd never done in 70 years of life. I became a detective investigating my own child. I drove to Manhattan, parked across from the Greywood Inn, and waited. I didn't plan to confront anyone. I just needed to see with my own eyes, to prove my suspicious heart wrong. But the large windows of that restaurant were painfully transparent. And there, at the corner table Frank and I had requested every anniversary, sat my daughter Emily. She wore the cashmere sweater I'd given her last Christmas, the expensive one I'd saved for months to afford. She was laughing, that genuine, unguarded laugh I hadn't heard directed at me in years. Across from her sat her husband Jason, raising a wine glass in what looked like a toast. Their children, my grandchildren, Jacob and Lily, sat beside them sipping what appeared to be ginger ale from fancy glasses, looking happier than I'd seen them in months. Emily leaned forward and kissed Jason tenderly. Then, with casual ease, she handed her purse to their server. He reached inside and pulled out a familiar black credit card. Mine. I didn't cross the street. I couldn't move. I stood there in the October wind, my coat clutched tight against my chest, watching my family celebrate something wonderful while I remained invisible, uninvited, but somehow still paying for their joy. I walked home slowly, each step feeling like a small death, like a soldier retreating from a battlefield where I had never even been allowed to draw a weapon. That night, I did something I hadn't done in decades. I opened the old cedar chest in my bedroom closet, the one that held all the memories I'd carefully preserved like pressed flowers between the pages of my life. Inside, beneath Frank's folded navy uniform and our wedding photos, lay a manila folder I'd labeled Emily's Future, 23 years ago. My handwriting was younger then, more optimistic, written in blue ink that had faded but not disappeared. Bank statements, canceled checks, receipts. Evidence of a mother's devotion that now felt like a prosecutor's case file. The first entry, $15,000. Emily's down payment for her first apartment in Queens when she was 25. I'd dipped into Frank's life insurance money, the money I'd promised myself I'd save for emergencies. But her tears over student loan debt had been my emergency. "Just a loan, Mom," she'd said, hugging me tight. "I'll pay you back as soon as I get the promotion." The promotion never came. The repayment never happened. Next, $8,500 for Jacob's private preschool when Emily claimed the public schools in her neighborhood weren't safe enough. I remembered sitting in that sterile bank office, signing papers to break my CD early, losing months of interest because a grandmother's worry about her grandson's education trumped financial wisdom. "You understand there's a penalty for early withdrawal?" the banker had asked. "I understand my family needs help," I'd replied, signing away my security. Then, $12,000 for Jason's business opportunity, a food truck venture that folded within 6 months. "It's an investment in our future, Mom," Emily had explained over coffee in my kitchen, bouncing baby Lily on her knee. "When Jason's successful, we'll all benefit." The business failed. The truck was repossessed. Jason got a regular job. I never saw a penny returned, never heard an apology offered. Page after page of financial hemorrhaging disguised as family love. Car repairs that were actually car upgrades. Emergency medical bills that turned out to be cosmetic procedures. Christmas gifts for the grandchildren that somehow required my funding while Emily posted vacation photos from Cancun. But it wasn't just money. I found the thank you cards Emily used to send. Genuine gratitude written in her careful handwriting. "Dear Mom, I don't know what we would do without you. Your generosity means everything to our little family. Love always, Emily." Those cards stopped arriving 3 years ago. Around the same time, her visits became less frequent, her phone calls shorter, her requests more demanding and less dressed up as favors. I sat on my bedroom floor, surrounded by this archaeological dig of my own exploitation, and tried to pinpoint the exact moment when I stopped being Emily's mother and became her personal ATM. Was it after Frank died, when grief made me desperate to feel needed? Was it when Jason lost his first job and I offered to help just until he got back on his feet? Or was it something more gradual? The slow erosion of boundaries by someone who knew exactly which emotional buttons to push. The next morning, I did something that felt like betraying myself. I called my bank and requested a detailed analysis of my credit card activity for the past 2 years. I need to see every transaction, every recurring charge, every authorized user, I told the customer service representative, a young woman whose voice carried the bored efficiency of someone who fielded these calls daily. Is this regarding potential fraud, Mrs. Morrison? I paused, staring out my kitchen window at the neighbor's garden where roses still bloomed despite the autumn chill. Yes, I said finally. I think it is. 3 days later, a thick envelope arrived containing my financial autopsy. 27 pages of charges that told the story of a woman who'd lost control of her own life without even realizing it. Emily wasn't just using my card occasionally. She'd systematically integrated it into her family's lifestyle. Grocery deliveries to her address, $200, $300 per week. Streaming services I'd never heard of. Monthly subscription boxes for organic baby food, premium coffee, artisanal dog treats for a dog I didn't even know they owned. Spotify family plans, Netflix upgrades, Amazon Prime annual renewals. But the real gut punch came on page 14. Recurring charges to something called Little Scholars Academy, $1,400 per month for 10 months. A Google search revealed it was an elite private school in Westchester County, more than an hour from where Emily claimed to live in Queens. They'd moved to an expensive suburb, using my money to pay for their children's prestigious education while telling me they couldn't afford to visit because gas was too expensive. I called the school directly. Yes, the Morrison account is current. The bursar's office confirmed. Mrs. Emily Thomas set up the automatic payments from her mother's account. Such a generous grandmother to invest in Jacob and Lily's future. Generous grandmother. I was funding their lie. That afternoon, I drove to the address listed on Jacob's school emergency contact form, past the modest Queens neighborhood where I thought Emily lived, through increasingly affluent suburbs where houses sat on acres of manicured lawn like monuments to success. The GPS led me to a colonial mansion with a 3-car garage, professional landscaping, and a swing set that probably cost more than some people's cars. Emily's Honda was parked in the circular driveway, dwarfed by Jason's new BMW, the one I apparently helped finance without knowing it. I didn't get out of my car. I just sat there, engine running, watching my grandson Jacob ride an expensive-looking bicycle on a driveway that my money had helped make possible while I clipped coupons to afford groceries. Through the large front windows, I could see movement. Emily passed by carrying what looked like fresh flowers, the kind of expensive arrangements I used to buy for special occasions before I started helping her family achieve their dreams. My phone buzzed. A text from Emily. Hi, Mom. Can't talk long, but wondering if you could help with Lily's dance class registration. It's due tomorrow and we're a little short this month. Just $150. I'll pay you back next week when Jason's bonus comes through. I stared at that message while sitting outside her mansion, watching her live a life I was subsidizing without invitation or acknowledgement. For the first time in my adult life, I typed a word I'd never used with my daughter. No. The response came immediately. Mom, are you okay? It's just $150. I wouldn't ask if it wasn't important. I typed back, I know about the house. I know about the school. I know about everything. My phone went silent. That evening, I made a decision that felt like jumping off a cliff. I called my credit card company and reported the card as stolen. Are you sure, Mrs. Morrison? The security representative asked. This will immediately cancel all authorized users and automatic payments linked to this account. I'm sure, I said, surprised by how steady my voice sounded. I want to cancel everything. Within hours, my phone started ringing. Emily, Jason, even a call from a number I didn't recognize that turned out to be Little Scholars Academy, wondering about a payment decline. I didn't answer any of them. Instead, I made myself a cup of tea. Real tea. Not the store-brand bags I'd been buying to save money for Emily's emergencies, and sat in Frank's old chair. For the first time in years, I felt something I'd almost forgotten existed. Peace. But peace, I was about to learn, was a luxury my family wouldn't allow me to keep. The doorbell rang at 7:23 a.m. the next morning, sharp and insistent like an alarm clock you can't silence. I was still in my robe, stirring honey into my coffee, when Emily's voice cut through the quiet morning air. "Mom, open up. We need to talk." Through the peephole, I could see her pacing on my front steps, phone pressed to her ear, gesticulating wildly to someone I couldn't see. Her face was flushed, her usually perfect hair disheveled. Behind her stood Jason, looking uncomfortable in his expensive suit, checking his watch repeatedly like a man late for something important. I took a slow sip of my coffee and walked to the living room window instead. Emily spotted me and pointed, her mouth moving rapidly in what appeared to be an animated conversation with whoever was on the other end of her phone. She hung up abruptly and marched to the window, tapping on the glass with manicured nails I'd unknowingly paid for. "Mom, this is ridiculous. You're being dramatic over nothing." Nothing. 27 pages of unauthorized charges was nothing. I opened the window just enough to speak. "I'm having my coffee, Emily, like civilized people do in the morning." "Civilized?" Her voice pitched higher. "What's civilized about canceling your daughter's credit card without warning? Do you know what you've done? Jacob's school payment bounced. Our grocery delivery was declined. I'm humiliated. Humiliated. Not sorry. Not apologetic. Humiliated that her theft had been interrupted." Jason stepped forward, his salesman smile forced and unconvincing. "Margaret, I think there's been a misunderstanding. Emily mentioned you're having some confusion about the finances. Maybe we should sit down and sort this out like family." Confusion. As if my ability to read bank statements was suddenly in question. "The only confusion," I said carefully, "is how my credit card ended up paying for a house I've never been invited to visit." Emily's face went white, then red. You drove to our house? That's stalking, Mom. That's not normal behavior." Stalking. I was now a stalker for discovering my own money was funding their lies. "Open this door right now," Emily demanded, pulling on the handle with both hands. "We're your family. You can't lock us out." But I could, and I did. I closed the window and returned to my kitchen, where my coffee had grown cold while my daughter transformed into someone I didn't recognize. Outside, the shouting continued for another 10 minutes before they finally left, car doors slamming like punctuation marks at the end of an argument I'd refused to participate in. An hour later, my phone started buzzing with text messages. "Mom, please be reasonable. We can work this out. You're hurting the grandchildren with this behavior. Dad would be ashamed of how you're treating his daughter." That last one hit like a physical blow. Using Frank's memory as ammunition was a new low, even for Emily. By noon, the messages had escalated. "Fine. If you want to be stubborn, that's your choice. But don't come crying to us when you're sick and alone. I hope this tantrum is worth losing your family over. The kids are asking why Grandma doesn't love them anymore." Each message was a precision strike aimed at the guilt and fear that had controlled me for years. The fear of being alone, the terror of losing my grandchildren, the crushing weight of being labeled the bad guy in a story where I was clearly the victim. That afternoon brought a new assault. My neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, knocked on my door, looking concerned and slightly embarrassed. "Margaret, honey, I don't want to get involved in family business, but Emily called me. She's worried about you. She thinks you might be having some memory issues. She asked me to keep an eye on you." Memory issues. Emily was now telling neighbors I was mentally incompetent. "My memory is fine, Dorothy. In fact, it's getting better every day." Mrs. Patterson shifted uncomfortably. "She mentioned something about you confusing bill payments and accusing her of things that didn't happen. She's concerned you might need help managing your affairs." The strategy was brilliant in its cruelty. Paint the mother as delusional, the daughter as concerned. Make my legitimate anger look like senile paranoia. "Dorothy," I said gently, "did Emily mention that she's been living in a $800,000 house in Westchester while telling me she couldn't afford groceries?" The confusion in my neighbor's eyes told me everything. Emily's version of events had been carefully crafted to exclude inconvenient truths. That evening, the nuclear option arrived in my mailbox. A manila envelope marked "Urgent Family Matter" in Emily's handwriting. Inside was a brochure for something called Golden Years Assisted Living and a business card for an attorney specializing in elder care and family protection services. A yellow sticky note in Emily's handwriting read, "Mom, We've scheduled a consultation for Thursday. Dr. Martinez says these episodes of paranoia and financial confusion are common at your age. We just want to help. Love, Emily and Jason. Episodes: paranoia, financial confusion. I was being systematically discredited by my own daughter. The phone rang at 8 p.m. Emily's voice was different now, softer, more concerned. The tone she'd used when I was genuinely sick. Mom? I know you're angry, but we need to talk about what's really going on here. Jason and I have been researching, and what you're experiencing, the suspicion, the paranoia, the difficulty managing money, these are early warning signs. Warning signs of what, Emily? Dementia, Mom. Or maybe just the stress of living alone. Either way, we think it's time to consider some assistance. For your own safety. There it was. The word that would justify everything. Dementia. I don't have dementia, Emily. I have bank statements. Mom, please listen to yourself. You're accusing your own daughter of stealing. Do you realize how that sounds? Do you remember Dad's last few months? How the paranoia started? Frank had developed some confusion near the end, suspecting nurses of stealing his wallet, accusing me of hiding his medications. It had been heartbreaking to watch. And now Emily was using his tragedy as a weapon against me. I remember Dad's illness very clearly, I said quietly. I also remember raising a daughter who wouldn't manipulate her dying father's memory to cover her own crimes. Crimes? Mom, you're scaring me. This isn't you talking, but it was me. Maybe for the first time in years, it was actually me talking. The consultation is Thursday at 2 p.m., Emily continued when I didn't respond. Dr. Martinez is very good with seniors who are struggling with these issues. We just want to help you stay safe and independent for as long as possible. Independent. While they stripped away my financial autonomy and questioned my mental capacity, after I hung up, I sat in my living room looking at family photos I'd displayed with such pride. Emily's graduation, her wedding, the grandchildren's school pictures, Frank and me on our last anniversary. All of it felt contaminated now, like beautiful memories that had been retroactively poisoned. But then I noticed something I'd overlooked before. In every photo, I was smiling, genuinely, radiantly happy. These moments had been real, even if the people in them had changed. I wasn't the one who'd become someone different. I was finally becoming myself again. Thursday's consultation was in 48 hours. Emily expected me to show up, submit to evaluation, accept whatever diagnosis would justify their control over my life and money. Instead, I picked up my phone and dialed a different number. Law offices of Patricia Hernandez. A crisp voice answered. I'd like to make an appointment, I said. I need to discuss financial elder abuse and protective legal measures. Of course. Can you tell me a bit about your situation? I looked at the assisted living brochure Emily had sent, then dropped it in the trash where it belonged. I'm a 70-year-old woman whose family is trying to steal her independence, I said, and I'm ready to fight back. Patricia Hernandez's office sat on the third floor of a modest building in downtown Brooklyn, worlds away from the sterile corporate environments where I'd signed away pieces of my financial soul over the years. Her waiting room felt lived in, comfortable, with real plants instead of plastic ones and magazines that weren't 6 months old. When she called my name, I expected to meet another polished professional who would listen politely and send me away with expensive advice I couldn't afford to follow. Instead, Patricia was a woman in her 50s with silver threading through her black hair and the kind of direct gaze that suggested she'd heard every family horror story imaginable and still managed to sleep at night. Mrs. Morrison, she said, settling behind a desk covered with case files and family photos. Tell me what's happening. So I did. Everything. The secret house, the unauthorized charges, the assisted living brochure, Emily's campaign to have me declared incompetent. Patricia took notes without interrupting, her expression growing grimmer with each detail. When I finished, she set down her pen and looked at me with something I hadn't seen in months. Respect. Mrs. Morrison, what you're describing is textbook financial elder abuse. Your daughter has been systematically exploiting your resources while undermining your autonomy. The fact that she's now questioning your mental capacity is particularly troubling. Hearing it stated so clearly, so professionally, Felt like receiving a medical diagnosis that finally explained symptoms I'd been suffering alone. Is there anything I can do? Or am I trapped? Patricia smiled for the first time since I'd walked in. Trapped? Mrs. Morrison, you hold all the cards. You're the account holder. You own your home. You have every right to protect your assets and make decisions about your own life. She opened a file folder and pulled out several documents. I'm going to recommend some immediate protective measures. First, we'll set up a new bank account that only you control. Second, we'll draft a comprehensive financial power of attorney that specifically prevents anyone from making decisions without your explicit consent. Third, we'll document everything Emily has done and put safeguards in place. What about Thursday? The consultation Emily scheduled? Patricia's expression hardened. You're not going. In fact, I'd like to contact Dr. Martinez myself and inform him that any evaluation conducted without your attorney present would be inappropriate and potentially actionable. For the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe fully. There's one more thing, Patricia continued. I want you to consider whether you'd like to pursue restitution for the money Emily has taken without authorization. Restitution. The word hung in the air like a challenge. How much are we talking about? Patricia consulted her notes. Based on what you've told me, conservatively, somewhere between $60,000 and $80,000 over the past 3 years. The number hit me like a physical blow. $60,000. More than Frank's entire life insurance payout. More than I'd saved for my own retirement security. I never added it all up. Most victims don't. The abuse happens gradually, normalized through emotional manipulation. But theft is theft, Mrs. Morrison, regardless of family relationships. That evening, I sat in my kitchen with a calculator and every bank statement Patricia had told me to gather. The real number was worse than her estimate. $87,432. Nearly $90,000 that Emily had systematically extracted from my life while I worried about affording groceries and skipped medical appointments because of copays. My phone rang at exactly 7 p.m. Emily, right on schedule. Mom, I spoke with Dr. Martinez today. He's very concerned that you missed your appointment. He says refusing evaluation is often a sign that the cognitive decline is more advanced than family members realize. I looked at Patricia's business card sitting beside my calculator. Emily, I didn't miss anything. I chose not to attend. Mom, please listen to me. I know you think we're against you, but we're trying to help. Jason and I have been researching care options, and there are some really lovely places where you could have assistance but still maintain independence. Like Golden Years Assisted Living? A pause. You kept the brochure? I kept everything, Emily. Every receipt, every bank statement, every piece of evidence. Another pause. Longer this time. When Emily spoke again, her voice had changed. Evidence of what, Mom? Evidence that my daughter has stolen nearly $90,000 from me while pretending to be concerned about my mental health. The silence stretched so long I wondered if she'd hung up. That's a serious accusation, Mom. Are you sure you want to say things like that? Things you can't take back? The threat was subtle, but unmistakable. Say too much, and there would be consequences. I'm very sure, Emily. I'm also sure that I've hired an attorney who specializes in elder abuse cases. The explosion was immediate. You hired a lawyer? Against your own family? Mom, do you understand what you're doing? Do you realize how this looks? How this makes us look? How it made them look. Not how it felt to be stolen from. Not remorse for the theft. Concern about appearances. I understand exactly what I'm doing, Emily. For the first time in years. Fine. If that's how you want to play this, we'll play. But don't come crying to us when your precious lawyer bleeds you dry and you're left with nothing. Don't call us when you're sick and alone and realize what you've thrown away. She hung up before I could respond. Within an hour, my phone started buzzing with messages from numbers I didn't recognize. This is Jacob. Mom says you're sick and don't want to see us anymore. Is that true? Grandma, it's Lily. Why are you being mean to Mommy? They were using my grandchildren as weapons now, coaching them to send messages designed to break my heart and my resolve. I stared at those texts for a long time, feeling the familiar pull of guilt and manipulation that had controlled me for so long. Then I did something that felt like jumping off a cliff. I responded to Jacob. Your grandmother loves you very much. Ask your mother to explain why she's been using my credit card without permission. When she's ready to tell you the truth, I'll be here. The response came quickly. Mom says you're confused and saying things that aren't true. She's crying. Of course she was crying. Tears had always been Emily's most effective tool. But this time, I didn't rush to fix whatever had made my daughter sad. Instead, I went to my bedroom and pulled out a box I'd hidden in the back of my closet. Inside were birthday cards and Christmas cards, and Mother's Day cards spanning 23 years. Emily's handwriting evolving from childish scrawl to elegant script, each one a small monument to the relationship we'd once shared. I read through them chronologically, watching our relationship deteriorate in real time through her words. The early cards were full of genuine gratitude and love. Thank you for everything, Mom. I'm so lucky to be your daughter. But somewhere around year 15, the tone changed. The gratitude became expectation. The appreciation became demand. Looking forward to spending time together soon became, hope you can help us out this month. When had love become transaction? When had I stopped being Emily's mother and become her personal bank? I found the last genuine card she'd ever sent, dated 3 years ago. Mom, I know I don't say it enough, but you mean everything to me. Thank you for always being there when we need you. Even then, it had been about need, not want. Not love, but utility. I placed that card on my nightstand and put the rest back in the box. Tomorrow, Patricia would file the paperwork to protect my remaining assets. Tomorrow, I would change my locks. Tomorrow, I would begin the process of recovering the woman I'd been before I learned that a mother's love could be weaponized against her. But tonight, I allowed myself to grieve for the daughter I'd raised and the family I'd thought we were, because some losses, even necessary ones, still deserved to be mourned. The locksmith arrived at 8 a.m. sharp, a gruff man in his 60s who reminded me of Frank with his careful attention to detail and respectful manner. He examined my front door with professional interest, running weathered fingers along the frame. These old Brooklyn brownstones have good bones, he said, pulling tools from a worn leather case. Just need the right protection. Protection. The word had taken on new meaning over the past week. How many keys do you want me to make, Mrs. Morrison? For the first time in decades, I knew the exact answer. Just one, for me. As he worked, installing deadbolts and changing locks that had protected my home for 12 years, I felt something I hadn't experienced since Frank died. Complete control over my own space. All done, he announced an hour later, handing me a set of gleaming new keys. Nobody gets in here unless you want them to. Nobody, including Emily. I tested the locks twice after he left, marveling at the solid click of mechanisms that answered only to me. The house felt different already. More mine. Less like a place where people could come and go as they pleased, taking whatever they wanted. My phone had been mercifully quiet all morning, but at 10:30 it erupted with rapid-fire texts. Mom, why aren't you answering? We need to talk. Jason drove by this morning. There was a locksmith truck in front of your house. Please tell me you didn't change the locks. That's not normal behavior. We're coming over to check on you. I turned off the phone and made myself a proper breakfast. Real eggs, not the egg substitute I'd been buying to save money for Emily's emergencies. Fresh orange juice instead of the generic powder. Toast with actual butter, thick and golden. For the first time in years, I ate without calculating the cost of each bite. The doorbell rang at 11:15. I watched through my window as Emily stood on the front steps, key in hand, trying unsuccessfully to open a door that no longer recognized her claim to access. She tried 3 times before accepting that something fundamental had changed. Mom, she called, pressing her face to the window. I know you're in there. Open this door right now. I continued washing my breakfast dishes, taking my time with each plate and cup. The knocking intensified. Jason appeared beside Emily, both of them looking increasingly frantic as they realized their usual methods of entry had been revoked. Margaret! Jason shouted. This is ridiculous. We're your family. You can't lock out your own family. But I could. And I had. Emily's phone appeared in her hand. Within seconds, my landline began ringing. The number she'd memorized for emergencies that apparently now included being denied immediate access to my home. I unplugged the phone from the wall. The assault continued for 20 minutes. Demands, pleas, threats, guilt trips, all directed at windows I no longer felt compelled to open. Finally, Emily's voice changed to the tone she'd used as a child when she wanted something badly. "Mom, please. I'm sorry about whatever you think I did. Can we just talk? I brought Jacob and Lily. They miss their grandma." I moved to the front window and looked down. Emily stood alone on the sidewalk. No children. No Jason. Just a desperate woman using imaginary grandchildren as emotional leverage. The lie was so casual, so automatic, that it crystallized something important. Emily had become someone who would say anything to get what she wanted. When had honesty become optional for my daughter? They left after an hour, but not before Emily shouted one final threat. "Fine. If this is how you want to be, we'll let everyone know what's really happening here. Don't blame us when the whole neighborhood thinks you've lost your mind." That afternoon, I did something I hadn't done in 5 years. I drove to the Met Cloisters, the medieval art museum in Fort Tryon Park, where Frank and I used to spend Sunday afternoons when we were young and poor and content to find entertainment that didn't cost anything. I walked through the galleries slowly, remembering how we'd invented stories about the people in the tapestries, making each other laugh with ridiculous medieval soap opera plots. Frank had always been able to find humor in the darkest historical periods, pointing out human resilience in art that had survived wars and plagues and centuries of upheaval. "Look at this," he'd said once, standing before a particularly somber religious painting. Whoever commissioned this survived everything medieval Europe could throw at them, and still had enough hope to create something beautiful. Standing there now, I understood what he'd meant. Survival wasn't just about enduring. It was about maintaining the capacity for beauty, for joy, for the small rebellions that made life worth living. I bought myself lunch in the museum cafe, not because I was hungry, but because I could. A sandwich that cost $12, money I would have once saved for Emily's next crisis. Wine at 2 p.m. on a Wednesday, because I was 70 years old and accountable to no one. The afternoon stretched before me like a gift I'd forgotten how to unwrap. When I returned home that evening, Mrs. Patterson was waiting by my front gate, looking concerned and slightly embarrassed. "Margaret, honey, Emily stopped by my house this afternoon. She's very worried about you." Of course she had. When direct confrontation failed, Emily had always been skilled at recruiting allies. "She mentioned that you've been confused lately. Something about changing locks and refusing to let family into your own home?" I looked at my neighbor, a woman I'd known for 8 years, someone who'd brought me casseroles after Frank's funeral and borrowed cups of sugar when the stores were closed. "Dorothy, did Emily mention why I changed the locks? She said you've been having some paranoid episodes, accusing her of taking money, imagining threats that aren't real." Paranoid. Imagining. The vocabulary of discreditation. "Would you like to see my bank statements?" I asked quietly. Mrs. Patterson looked startled. "Oh, I couldn't. That's private financial information." Emily didn't think it was too private when she was spending it. Something shifted in my neighbor's expression, a flicker of doubt about the story she'd been told. "Margaret, are you saying that Emily actually—" "I'm saying that sometimes the people who claim to be protecting us are the ones we need protection from." That evening, I made another decision that felt revolutionary. I ordered dinner from my favorite restaurant. Not takeout eaten standing in my kitchen, but actual delivery that I ate at my dining room table with cloth napkins and the good china I'd been saving for special occasions that never came. The doorbell rang again at 8 p.m. Through the peephole, I saw a delivery driver holding flowers, 24 red roses in an expensive crystal vase. The card read, "Mom, I'm sorry we argued. I love you more than you know. Please call me so we can work this out. Love always, Emily." I carried the flowers to my kitchen and dropped them, vase and all, into the garbage can. Love didn't try to have you declared incompetent. Love didn't steal your financial security while claiming to protect you. Love certainly didn't use your dead husband's memory as a weapon against you. That night, I slept better than I had in months. Not because my problems were solved, but because for the first time in years, I was the only person who had keys to my own life. But I was about to learn that Emily's arsenal contained weapons I hadn't yet imagined. The next morning brought a knock at my door I hadn't expected. Two uniformed police officers, looking official and slightly uncomfortable. "Mrs. Morrison, we've received a wellness check request from your daughter. She's concerned about your mental state and asked us to verify that you're safe and capable of caring for yourself." Behind them, parked across the street, sat Emily's Honda. She hadn't come to the door herself, but she was watching from a safe distance as her latest strategy unfolded. A wellness check. The nuclear option of family warfare. I looked at the officers, then at my daughter's car, then back at the men who had the power to determine whether I was competent to live in my own home. "Officers," I said calmly, "I think we need to have a very long conversation." Officer Rodriguez was younger than Emily, with kind eyes and the patient demeanor of someone who'd conducted enough wellness checks to recognize the difference between genuine concern and family manipulation. His partner, Officer Chen, stood slightly behind him, taking notes in a small pad that made every word feel official and permanent. "Mrs. Morrison, your daughter Emily Thomas contacted our department this morning. She expressed concerns about your recent behavior and requested that we verify your well-being." I glanced past them to Emily's car, where I could see her silhouette hunched over her phone, probably documenting everything for whatever narrative she was constructing. "Officers, please come in. I think you should hear the whole story." I led them to my living room, the same space where Emily had demanded entry just yesterday, now serving as the stage for what felt like a trial of my own competence. "Mrs. Morrison," Officer Rodriguez began gently, "your daughter mentioned several concerning incidents. She says you've been experiencing confusion about finances, accusing family members of theft, and exhibiting paranoid behavior like changing locks without explanation." Paranoid behavior. Emily had coached them well. "Officer Rodriguez, may I ask you something? If someone had been using your credit card without permission for 3 years, taking nearly $90,000, would you consider changing your locks paranoid or practical?" Both officers exchanged a glance. Officer Chen stopped writing. "Ma'am, are you saying your daughter has been stealing from you?" "I'm saying my daughter has been using my credit card to fund her family's lifestyle while telling me she couldn't afford to visit because gas was too expensive. I'm saying she moved to an $800,000 house in Westchester and enrolled my grandchildren in private school, all paid for with my money, while claiming she was too poor to help with groceries when I visit." I stood and walked to my kitchen counter, where I'd organized everything Patricia had told me to gather. Bank statements, credit card bills, receipts, the documentation of my own financial autopsy. "These are my bank statements for the past 2 years, I said, handing them to Officer Rodriguez. "Every unauthorized charge is highlighted in yellow. There are 27 pages. Officer Rodriguez began flipping through the pages, his expression growing more serious with each sheet. Officer Chen leaned over to look, her note-taking becoming more rapid. "Mrs. Morrison, these are substantial amounts. Why didn't you report this earlier?" The question I'd been asking myself for weeks. Because she's my daughter, officer. Because I thought I was helping family in need. Because I trusted someone who spent years conditioning me to believe that my money was our money, but her life was her business. "And the locks?" Officer Chen asked. "Would you give keys to someone who's been robbing you?" Officer Rodriguez closed the folder and looked at me with something that might have been respect. "Mrs. Morrison, based on what you've shown us, it appears you have legitimate concerns about financial exploitation. Have you contacted an attorney?" "I have. Patricia Hernandez, downtown Brooklyn. She specializes in elder abuse cases." "Elder abuse," Officer Chen repeated, writing it down. "Ma'am, do you mind if we ask you some questions to assess your mental state? Standard procedure for wellness checks. Ask away." For the next 20 minutes, they conducted what felt like an informal competency evaluation. What year was it? Who was the president? Could I remember my address, my social security number, my doctor's name? Did I understand the value of money? Could I explain why I'd taken the actions I'd taken? I answered every question clearly, calmly, providing details that demonstrated not only mental competence but strategic thinking. "Mrs. Morrison," Officer Rodriguez said finally, "you appear to be in full command of your faculties and acting reasonably to protect yourself from financial exploitation. However, We do need to speak with your daughter before we close this call. They walked to Emily's car while I watched from my window. The conversation was brief but animated. Emily gestured wildly, pointing at my house, her voice rising enough that I could hear the tone, if not the words. Officer Rodriguez remained calm, occasionally shaking his head. When they returned to my door, Officer Rodriguez looked apologetic. Mrs. Morrison, your daughter insists you're exhibiting signs of dementia and paranoia. She claims the financial irregularities you've shown us are the result of your own confusion about transactions you authorized but don't remember. Officer, let me ask you something. If I were suffering from dementia severe enough to forget authorizing $90,000 in transactions, would I be able to organize 27 pages of bank statements in chronological order with every discrepancy highlighted and documented? Officer Chen smiled for the first time since arriving. That's a very good point, ma'am. Your daughter also mentioned that you've missed medical appointments and behaved erratically with neighbors. Officer Rodriguez continued, I haven't missed any medical appointments. As for neighbors, Mrs. Patterson can confirm that the only erratic thing I've done is tell her the truth about what Emily's been doing. We'll follow up on that. In the meantime, Mrs. Morrison, you might want to consider filing a formal report about the financial irregularities. After they left, I watched Emily's car remain parked across the street for another hour. She was on her phone constantly, probably calling reinforcements, planning her next strategy. Finally, she got out and walked to my door one more time. Mom, she called through the door, her voice different now, smaller, more desperate. Please, can we just talk? I know you're upset, but we can fix this. We're family. I looked through the peephole at my daughter, this woman I'd raised and loved and sacrificed for, who was now treating my reasonable response to theft as evidence of mental illness. Emily, I said through the door, the police just confirmed that I'm competent to make my own decisions. I've decided that I don't want to talk to you right now. But Mom, I've decided that until you can acknowledge what you've done and show some genuine remorse, we don't have anything to discuss. What I've done? Mom, I haven't done anything except try to help family when we needed it. There it was. Even now, even caught red-handed with documentation that would hold up in court, Emily couldn't admit she'd done anything wrong. Goodbye, Emily. I walked away from the door, leaving her standing on my steps, probably for the first time in her adult life facing a consequence she couldn't manipulate, charm, or guilt her way out of. That evening, Patricia called with an update. Margaret, I spoke with Dr. Martinez's office today. Apparently, Emily never actually scheduled an appointment for you. She was fishing to see if you'd submit to an evaluation she could use against you later. Another lie. Another manipulation so casual it probably hadn't even registered as deception in Emily's mind. What's our next step? We file a formal complaint for financial elder abuse. We also request a forensic accounting of all your accounts to document the full scope of the theft. And Margaret? You might want to prepare yourself for this to get worse before it gets better. Worse how? Desperate people do desperate things. Emily's losing control of a situation she's maintained for years. People in her position often escalate before they surrender. That night, I made myself dinner and ate it at my dining room table with the good china and cloth napkins. Not because it was a special occasion, but because I was learning that ordinary evenings could be special when you weren't spending them being manipulated and financially drained. I thought about Frank, about what he would say if he could see how our daughter had turned out. But then I remembered something he'd told me during his last lucid week, when the cancer had clarified his perspective on what really mattered. Maggie, he'd said, holding my hand in his hospital bed, don't let anyone, not even Emily, convince you that you're not worth fighting for. At the time, I'd thought he was talking about fighting his illness. Now I understood he'd been talking about fighting for myself. Tomorrow, Patricia would file the formal complaint. Tomorrow, I would officially become a woman who'd pressed charges against her own daughter. Tomorrow, the last bridge between Emily and consequence would finally burn. But tonight, I slept peacefully in a house where every lock answered only to me. The certified letter arrived on a Tuesday morning, thick and official, bearing the seal of Brooklyn Family Court. I signed for it with steady hands, though my heart was racing as I carried it to my kitchen table. The same table where I'd eaten so many meals alone while my money funded someone else's family dinners. Inside, A court summons for Emily, Jason, and me. A hearing date 3 weeks away. And a temporary restraining order that legally prohibited Emily from contacting me or accessing any of my financial accounts. Patricia had moved fast. But Emily, apparently, had moved faster. My phone rang before I'd finished reading the legal documents. An unfamiliar number with a 212 area code. Mrs. Morrison, this is Dr. Rebecca Walsh from Mount Sinai Psychiatric Services. I understand you've been experiencing some difficulties with family relationships and financial management. Your daughter Emily has scheduled an emergency evaluation for you this afternoon at 2 p.m. My blood went cold. Dr. Walsh, I didn't request any evaluation, and my daughter has no authority to schedule medical appointments for me. A pause. Mrs. Morrison, according to the information I have, your daughter has concerns about your cognitive capacity and believes an evaluation would be in your best interest. Doctor, let me be very clear. I am a mentally competent 70-year-old woman. I have legal representation, and I am currently pursuing charges against my daughter for financial elder abuse. Any evaluation conducted without my explicit consent would be inappropriate. Another pause. Longer this time. I see. Well, perhaps we should reschedule when you feel more comfortable. Dr. Walsh, did my daughter pay for this appointment in advance? Silence. I'm not at liberty to discuss payment arrangements. Of course. Emily was shopping for a diagnosis, literally trying to purchase medical opinions that would support her claims about my incompetence. I hung up and immediately called Patricia. Margaret, this is exactly what I was afraid of, she said after I explained the situation. Emily is trying to establish a medical record of your alleged incompetence before our hearing. We need to document everything, every call, every attempted appointment, every manipulation. What if she finds a doctor willing to declare me incompetent without actually examining me? She can't. Not legally. But she can try to create a paper trail that makes it look like you're refusing necessary medical care. It's a common tactic in elder abuse cases. That afternoon, instead of sitting in Dr. Walsh's office submitting to an evaluation I didn't need, I did something I hadn't done in months. I visited my real doctor, Dr. Jennifer Park, for my annual physical. Margaret, Dr. Park said after a thorough examination, "You're in excellent health for someone your age. Blood pressure normal, cognitive function sharp, reflexes good. Is there something specific you were concerned about? Doctor, would you mind documenting that I'm mentally competent? I may need that information for legal purposes." Dr. Park raised an eyebrow but made notes in my chart. Is someone questioning your competence? My daughter. She's been stealing from me and now claims I'm too confused to manage my own affairs. Margaret, I've been your doctor for 8 years. You're one of the most organized, articulate patients I have. If someone is questioning your mental capacity, they're either misinformed or deliberately manipulative. She printed out a letter on official letterhead stating that I was mentally competent and capable of managing my own affairs. Dated and signed with her medical license number clearly visible. Patricia would add it to our growing file of evidence. That evening brought the worst assault yet. My doorbell rang at 6 p.m. Through the peephole, I saw 2 men in dark suits, looking official and serious. Mrs. Morrison, we're from Adult Protective Services. We've received a report that you're living in unsafe conditions and may need assistance with daily living activities. Adult Protective Services. Emily had escalated to government intervention. I opened the door with the chain still attached. May I see your identification? They showed proper credentials. Real APS workers, not Emily's hired actors. Mrs. Morrison, we need to conduct a home inspection to verify your living conditions and assess your care needs. Based on what report? We received information that you're isolated, confused about finances, possibly malnourished, and living in unsanitary conditions. I looked at these men, then at my spotless home behind me, then back at them. Gentlemen, would you like to see my kitchen? My bathroom? My medical records? Or would you prefer to start with the legal documents showing that my daughter has been systematically stealing from me while claiming to be concerned about my welfare? The home inspection took 2 hours. They examined my refrigerator, fully stocked with fresh food, my medicine cabinet, properly organized, my utilities, all current, my personal hygiene, impeccable, and my ability to answer questions about my daily routine, comprehensive and detailed. "Mrs. Morrison," the senior investigator said finally, "your home is clean, well-maintained, and fully functional. You appear to be in good health and completely capable of independent living. We'll be closing this case as unfounded. Will there be a record that the complaint was false?" "Yes, ma'am. And Mrs. Morrison? Whoever reported this either has very outdated information about your circumstances or may have been deliberately providing false information to government services." After they left, I sat in my living room and tried to process the enormity of what Emily had done. She'd attempted to weaponize medical professionals, police services, and now government agencies against me. My own daughter was systematically trying to destroy my credibility and independence because I'd refused to continue funding her lifestyle. My phone rang at 8 p.m. "Mom." Emily's voice was different, flat, cold, stripped of all pretense of affection. "Emily, there's a restraining order." "I know about the restraining order. I know about the court date. I know about your little lawyer. But you need to understand something, Mom. You're 70 years old. You live alone. You need us more than we need you." The threat was so naked, so cruel, that it took my breath away. "Are you threatening me, Emily?" "I'm explaining reality. You can drop these ridiculous charges and we can go back to the way things were, or you can be a stubborn old woman who loses her family forever. Your choice." "Emily, let me explain something to you. I raised you. I know who you used to be before you became someone who steals from elderly people and lies to government agencies. And I know you're scared right now because your source of easy money just got cut off. You think this is about money? I know it's about money. $90,000 of my money that you took without permission. That money was invested in family, in your grandchildren's future. I can't believe you're so selfish that you'd rather give it to lawyers than to your own blood." Invested in family. That was how she'd rationalized stealing from her mother. "Emily, I'm going to say this once. When you're ready to acknowledge what you've done, when you're ready to show genuine remorse instead of making excuses, when you're ready to discuss how you're going to repay the money you stole, then we can talk. Until then, we have nothing to say to each other. Fine, but don't come crying to us when you're sick and alone and realize what you've thrown away. Don't expect us to take care of you when you're dying in some nursing home with no family around you." The line went dead. I sat in the silence that followed, not feeling devastated as Emily had intended, but oddly relieved. She'd finally dropped all pretense. The mask was off. The loving daughter concerned about her mother's well-being had revealed herself to be someone who would threaten an elderly woman with abandonment in her final years if she refused to continue being stolen from. I picked up the phone and called Patricia. "She just violated the restraining order," I said. "And she threatened me with abandonment if I don't drop the charges." "Did you record the call?" "No, but I remember every word." "Write it down. Everything. Word for word while it's fresh. We'll add it to the file." As I wrote Emily's threats in my careful handwriting, I thought about the daughter I'd raised, the little girl who used to crawl into my lap when she was scared, who'd cried when she accidentally stepped on ants, who'd once saved her allowance for 3 months to buy me a Mother's Day present. When had that child become someone who would threaten her own mother with dying alone? But then I realized something important. Emily's threat had no power over me anymore. I wasn't going to die alone and unloved, because I'd learned to love and respect myself again. And that was something no one could steal from me. The courtroom was smaller than I'd expected. Nothing like the dramatic venues you see on television. Just a simple room with wooden benches, fluorescent lighting, and the quiet authority of justice waiting to be served. Emily sat 3 rows ahead of me with Jason and a lawyer they'd apparently hired at the last minute. She wore the navy blue dress I'd bought her for her job interview 5 years ago, styled her hair the way she knew I loved, and periodically dabbed at her eyes with tissues. Even here, even now, she was performing the role of devoted daughter, wronged by an unreasonable mother. All rise for the Honorable Judge Maria Santos. Judge Santos was a woman in her 50s with silver hair and eyes that suggested she'd seen every variety of human behavior and wasn't easily fooled by performance. Patricia had prepared me well. The evidence was overwhelming. Bank statements, unauthorized charges, the secret house, the false medical appointments, the APS complaint, Emily's violation of the restraining order. Your Honor, Emily's lawyer began, my client is a loving daughter who has been unfairly accused by her elderly mother. Mrs. Morrison is clearly experiencing cognitive decline and paranoia, which explains these misguided accusations against family members who only want to help her. The same strategy Emily had been using for months, now presented as legal defense. Patricia stood with calm confidence. Your Honor, the evidence will show that Mrs. Morrison is mentally competent and has been the victim of systematic financial exploitation by her daughter. We have documentation proving nearly $90,000 in unauthorized transactions, along with evidence of the defendant's attempts to manipulate medical and social services to avoid accountability. For the next 2 hours, our case unfolded like the pages of a book I'd been forced to live. Bank statements were entered into evidence. Dr. Park's competency letter was read aloud. The APS investigators testified that my home was well maintained, and I showed no signs of inability to care for myself. The police officers who'd conducted the wellness check testified that I'd been lucid, organized, and reasonable, while Emily had been evasive and contradictory. When Emily finally took the stand, I watched her try to reconstruct reality through tears and dramatic pauses. Your Honor, my mother has been confused and paranoid for months. She thinks everyone is trying to steal from her. I've only been trying to help manage her finances because she was making mistakes and forgetting things. Ms. Thomas, Judge Santos said, can you explain why you moved to an expensive home in Westchester while telling your mother you couldn't afford to visit her? Emily's composure cracked slightly. We wanted to live in a better school district for the children. My mother always said she wanted the best for her grandchildren. Using her credit card without explicit permission? She said we were family, and family helps each other. Do you have documentation of this permission? It was verbal. She told me to use the card when we needed help. For 3 years? Including major purchases like private school tuition and mortgage payments on a house she's never seen? Emily's answers became increasingly defensive, contradictory, desperate. When I took the stand, Patricia asked simple questions that let me tell my story clearly. How the unauthorized charges had escalated, how Emily had hidden her true living situation, how she'd tried to have me declared incompetent when I finally said no. Mrs. Morrison, Judge Santos asked, what outcome are you seeking from this proceeding? I looked at Emily, this woman I'd raised and loved, who was now staring at me with undisguised hatred. Your Honor, I want restitution for the money that was taken. I want legal protection from further financial abuse. And I want acknowledgement that what happened to me was wrong. Judge Santos reviewed her notes for several long minutes before speaking. The evidence clearly shows systematic financial exploitation of an elderly person by her adult daughter. Ms. Thomas, your claims about your mother's incompetence are contradicted by every professional who has evaluated her. Your unauthorized use of her financial resources, while she lived modestly to support your family's expensive lifestyle, constitutes elder abuse under state law. Emily's face went white. I'm ordering full restitution of $87,432 to be paid over 5 years with interest. I'm also issuing a permanent restraining order prohibiting the defendants from contacting Mrs. Morrison except through legal counsel. This court finds that Mrs. Morrison is fully competent and has been the victim of financial exploitation by her own family. Outside the courthouse, Patricia squeezed my hand. You did it, Margaret. You fought for yourself, and you won. But standing there in the October sunshine, I realized I'd won something much more valuable than money or legal vindication. I'd won myself back. 6 months later, I was sitting in a sidewalk cafe in Paris, drinking real French coffee and watching the world go by. The trip was something I'd dreamed about with Frank but never taken because there was always some family emergency that required my savings. Now, with the legal settlement providing restitution and my expenses finally my own, I could afford to do things that brought me joy instead of funding other people's dreams. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Grandma? It's Jacob. I'm 16 now and have my own phone. Can we talk? My heart stopped. I hadn't seen my grandchildren since the court case. Emily had kept them from me completely. using them as the final punishment for daring to stand up for myself. I called the number immediately. "Grandma?" Jacob's voice was deeper than I remembered, but unmistakably him. "Jacob, sweetheart, how did you get my number?" "I found it in Mom's old phone when she gave it to me." "Grandma, I need to tell you something. I know what really happened. I know about the money and the court case and why we can't see you anymore." My breath caught. "Mom told us you were sick and didn't want to see us. But I found the court documents when I was looking for my birth certificate for college applications. I read everything." He paused, and when he spoke again, his voice was thick with emotion. "Grandma, I'm so sorry. I can't believe she did that to you. I can't believe she lied to us about why you were gone. Jacob, you have nothing to apologize for. You were a child. None of this was your fault. But I believed her. We all did. We thought you just didn't want us anymore." "I never stopped wanting you, sweetheart. Not for a single day. Can I see you? I mean, I know there's the restraining order against Mom and Dad, but does that apply to me too?" I was crying now, sitting in a Parisian cafe, crying from joy instead of pain for the first time in years. "The restraining order doesn't apply to you, Jacob. You can see me anytime you want." 2 weeks later, Jacob came to my house. He was taller than his father now, with Frank's gentle eyes and a maturity that broke my heart, because I knew it had been earned through witnessing family dysfunction he should never have seen. "Grandma, I brought something for you." He handed me a manila envelope. Inside were handwritten letters from both him and Lily, apologizing for the years they'd been kept away, expressing love I thought I'd lost forever. Lily's letter included a drawing she'd made when she was 8, a picture of the two of us baking cookies together, with "I miss you, Grandma" written in purple crayon. "She drew that 6 months after we stopped seeing you," Jacob explained. "She kept asking when you were going to get better and come back. Mom finally told her to stop asking. We spent the afternoon in my garden, the one I'd been too depressed to tend properly for years, but had recently brought back to life. Jacob helped me plant bulbs that would bloom next spring, and we talked about everything. His college plans, his girlfriend, his dreams for the future. "Grandma, can I ask you something?" "Anything, sweetheart. Are you happy now? I mean, without us. Without the family?" I looked at this young man I'd helped raise, this grandson who'd found his way back to me despite everything his mother had done to prevent it. "Jacob, I'm happier than I've been in years. Not because I lost the family, but because I found myself. And now, with you here, I feel like I'm getting the best parts of my family back." That evening, after Jacob left, I called Patricia with an update. "Margaret, you sound different, lighter." "I feel different. For the first time in my adult life, I'm living for myself instead of being used by others." "Any regrets about the court case?" I thought about Emily, somewhere in Westchester, probably still angry, still convinced she was the victim in our story. "No regrets. I lost a daughter who was stealing from me and got back a grandson who actually loves me. That seems like a fair trade." The next morning brought another surprise. A knock at my door from Mrs. Patterson, carrying a plate of homemade cookies and a sheepish expression. "Margaret, I owe you an apology. A huge one. I should have listened to you instead of believing Emily's version of events. Dorothy, you couldn't have known. But I should have trusted you. I've known you for 8 years. I should have recognized that you were telling the truth." She handed me the cookies and a card that simply read, "To a woman who taught me that standing up for yourself is never too late." That night, I sat in my living room with tea and Mrs. Patterson's cookies, reading thank you letters from other elderly people who'd heard about my case through newspaper coverage. Apparently, my story had inspired others to examine their own family relationships and seek help for financial exploitation they'd been too ashamed to report. One letter particularly moved me. "Dear Mrs. Morrison, reading about your courage helped me realize that my son's borrowing was actually stealing. I filed a police report yesterday. Thank you for showing me that protecting myself doesn't make me a bad mother. It makes me a strong woman." I kept that letter on my refrigerator, next to Jacob's graduation photo and Lily's crayon drawing. 6 months later, Lily found my address and showed up at my door with a friend's mother who'd agreed to drive her. At 15, she looked so much like Emily at that age that it took my breath away. "Grandma, I know I'm not supposed to be here without permission, but I had to see you. I had to tell you that I remember everything. I remember the cookies and the stories and the way you used to let me help in the garden. We spent 3 hours catching up on the years we'd lost. And when she left, she hugged me with the fierce intensity of someone making up for lost time. Grandma, I want you to know something. What Mom did was wrong. Jacob and I both know that now. And we want you in our lives no matter what she says. These days, I wake up every morning in a house where every lock answers only to me, where every dollar I spend is my own choice, where every relationship in my life is based on genuine affection rather than financial utility. I've learned that sometimes the greatest act of love is refusing to enable someone's worst behavior, even when that someone is your own child. Emily still lives in her expensive house, though I heard through Jacob that they're struggling financially now that their primary funding source has been cut off. The court-ordered restitution payments arrive monthly, often late, but they arrive. I don't spend the money on necessities anymore. I spend it on the life I should have been living all along. Travel, books, theater tickets, dinners with friends I'd lost touch with when all my emotional energy was devoted to managing Emily's crises. I spend it on myself, without guilt, because I finally understand that I'm worth the investment. Have you ever felt like someone you loved was taking advantage of your kindness? Have you ever wondered if standing up for yourself would cost you your family? Let me tell you something I've learned. The family worth keeping will love you more for respecting yourself, not less. If this story resonated with you, please share it in the comments. And if you know someone who needs to hear this message, that it's never too late to reclaim your dignity and your life, please like this video and subscribe to help this story reach them. Because sometimes, the greatest gift we can give someone is permission to save themselves.